Okay, everybody, greetings and welcome. I am Marguerite Rigoglioso of Seven Sisters Mystery School, and I want to warmly welcome you to this conversation that I'm going to be having with author Darren Starwyn, who is a friend of mine. As you know, these are momentous times that we're in right now, and we need all the help we can get. So I first wanted to remind you that for receiving some of that assistance, you can check out the Seven Sisters Mystery School.com site. And the seven is written out, SEVEN. And on there, you will find various offerings, particularly designed to support us during this time. For example, my monthly Mother Mary Love and Empowerment Circle, which meets the third Thursday of every month. There are lots of free offerings that I have going on, previous courses, and also and especially one-on-one private sessions with me to help you with your spiritual growth, as well as helping you move through this time with grace, because many of us are really quite challenged with everything that's going on. And toward that end, there could be perhaps nothing better than to have Darren here with us today to talk about his new book. First, a bit about Darren. I know him personally from the Bay Area. We were friends, still are friends, even though I'm no longer living in the Bay Area. But he's got quite an impressive pedigree. He's had a long career as an acupuncturist, and he's also been a medical device developer, as well as a writer, healer, and teacher. And his superpower, one of them, has been to integrate therapeutic systems from around the world in his sessions, his healing sessions, and these devices that he's been working on. And he's also written 4 groundbreaking books and led hundreds of workshops and seminars, and again, has invented several devices used worldwide that are based on healing through vibration. So he's a real innovator in advanced mind-body healing systems. So welcome, Darren.
Thank you so much, Marguerite. I appreciate having me on here.
Yeah, you're welcome. So today we're going to talk about your book, Awaken, the Avatar Within. Now, is this book 4 or 5?
Is it 4 or 5?
Yeah, is this your 4th or 5th book?
Well, this is actually the fourth book, yes.
Perfect. Okay, excellent.
I mean, there's so many other things I've written, but as far as complete books, it would be number 4.
Right. And, 4 is impressive. So what this book is a roadmap for uncovering your superpowers, upgrading your body, and at the same time, uplifting humanity. Essentially, it's a sophisticated and accessible guidebook for healing and spiritual awakening. And I have looked at this book, and it truly is excellent. It's filled with not only his amazing teachings, but beautiful stories and anecdotes that have also been taken from his client encounters and much, much more. So it's a really wonderful book. We're going to go more deeply into what this is about. But first, Darren, why don't you tell us what inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. It's really a passion that I have felt for a long time about. I've always been concerned about what's going on in the world. That goes back to my early preteen years when I used to be in lots of political debates in junior high school, back when presidential elections, and I was a very strongly advocate for the environment even when I was a teenager, and I even went to college to study environmental ecology. And there's always been this question to me, like, what can we really do? Like, what can I really do? So in my younger years, it was more political action. And then then later it became more of a spiritual approach. Like, what can I, maybe through meditation and through sharing this type of thing. And it's continued to evolve. And it became clear to me that there's much, like, what is really going to change this situation where there seems to be, like, the people that have all the power in the world and all the money are generally using it for ill purposes in a large measure of cases, and that there's all these crises going on that seem almost insolvable and almost all seem to be going in the wrong direction. And it became clear to me that there actually is one power in this world that can bring us in the right direction, and that's the power of what I would call light workers, people who are dedicated to the light, but yet have not yet realized how powerful they are, especially when people come together in joint cooperation and consciousness. And so I know that that's a lot of people think of that in a kind of general, vague way, like, yes, we should come together and consciousness is the answer. But nobody had, I know, specifically said a roadmap of how that would happen. So this book just coalesced out of just a lot of transmissions that have come to me for a long time that I consider from the divine, from my avatar self, just writings, a lot of separate writings. And then I thought, well, these should be put together into a book. And then it actually came together as a complete roadmap. So that's really the inspiration, is just my own passionate feeling that there's something that we light workers can and need to do to actually do our part in bringing the world through this crisis point we're in now. And also just to be happier, to be happier and more fulfilled as well.
Yeah, beautiful. And I couldn't agree more that I I don't think the answers are political, and they're certainly not going to come from the top down. They're really going to come from the bottom up. And so I think that spirituality itself is deeply spiritual, it is deeply political, but not in the way that we normally think of politics and activism and so forth. But it's um, it's a real force for generating change, and healing has to be an essential part of that. Otherwise, we're just going to continue to have unhealed leaders, unhealed groups, and so forth that are
Right.
acting in dysfunctional ways, right?
That's more the rule than the exception.
Yes, exactly. So let's dive in then. You know, you're talking about becoming the avatar. Let's just clarify for viewers what the avatar is and why we want to become one. What your book is aiming to do here with that.
That's an important point. And it's important not to look at it dualistically, because avatar literally comes from a Sanskrit word avatara that means descent. And it's specifically talking about this very ultimately high divine vibration of source energy, of divine energy, whatever people would like to use, coming down into a physical embodiment. And so that's what an avatar is. So most people think of avatar as certain very special, unique superstar people like Jesus or Rama or Krishna or Buddha or Kuan Yin, like the people that are these famous names that led movements that affected millions and millions of people. And actually it led to the creation of religions, which have often veered far away from the original teaching of the avatar. But I'm using it in a term that in this particular time we're living in, there's millions of us who are avatars. Maybe ultimately you could say every human being is ultimately an avatar. And then there's certain ones that are already well along the path of doing the inner work and awakening to be able to realize that and embody it. So avatar really would be the divine in human form awakening to its own divine nature. And the word embodiment is very important, because I feel like there's been kind of a split in so many spiritual people for so long of accessing some higher states of consciousness and feeling a lot of loving feelings and inspirations, but then having just kind of a schizophrenic up and down, experience with a lot of dramas, because there had been significant lack of embodiment, like not fully bringing that energy all the way through the body.
Right.
And that's what I've seen in my healing work. So many healers that have experienced high spiritual energy, like in their mind or in their heart chakra, perhaps, but then the lower chakras in their body are really hadn't accepted that, or many other parts of the body's cellular structure. So this embodiment of being an avatar is a very much a physical process. It's not just a shift in attitude or having some kind of high out-of-body experience or something. It's a physiological process, is how I'm looking at it, actually grounding that experience of being an avatar.
That's so beautiful. That definitely corresponds with all the information I've been receiving over the
Yeah,
years, that we're not meant to ascend out of our body. We're meant to bring all of that into, or as you're saying, awaken what is already latent, in us. if only we know how to pluck the right strings of our DNA or, do these other processes. And that's why I call the process inscension instead of ascension.
Okay.
So that it's going within or bringing it within, and that this is going to be how we transform into what is also called the fifth dimensional world, or the fifth dimensional consciousness, right? The world where our superpowers are engaged. We're connecting through telepathy. We have higher levels of healing and self-healing abilities within us. We can focus less on trauma and more on joy and creativity, right? So let's jump into this. You are talking about helping people to free themselves up from these long-term issues, such as anxiety, chronic pain, or post-traumatic stress. What is your solution? What are you talking about in the book that is first addressing that level, which is like a stage toward
Right.
our own avatar embodiment, right? We first have to get through the healing. So let's talk about the healing part, and then let's talk about the accessing the avatar aspects.
Yes, and before I say that, I want to mention one thing is that I've been reading, your most recent book about Mother Mary, and I feel like that book has such a great piece in it also about being the physiological process of being an avatar. I really appreciate how you've laid that out of detailed historical information about how many of these women went through the process of this, that I'm calling Christing in their own body. So, yeah, I want to really mention that also. But
Oh, thank you. Yes, so that would be my book, The Mystery Tradition of Miraculous
yeah,
Conception, Mary, and the Lineage of Virgin Births. Yes, because I'm talking about that high-level technology of women who are able to become so high vibrational that they're able to conceive in special, non-ordinary
right.
ways. Mary was part of that, but she wasn't the only one. So anyway, thank you.
Yeah,
And yeah, so then talking about the healing aspect of what
yeah.
you're offering in the book and through your sessions as well.
There's a whole section in the book called Quantum Healing. It's one of the major sections in there that has about 5 or 6 different chapters in it. And it's what I personally practice in my own healing practice. And I actually call it quantum catalyst healing to differentiate it from many other people that use that term for systems that may be different than this. And a catalyst is something that creates transformation in another substance or system without itself being changed. That's the definition from science of a catalyst. And that's the way I experience it, that basically somebody who is experiencing what I would call the quantum field, which I think I should define first to be able to answer your
Yes.
question really
Starting with
intelligently.
quantum, let's talk about what is the definition of quantum really? Is it?
Yeah, well, the original definition of quantum would be a discrete amount of energy that's measured in a subatomic particle, like
Okay.
a photon of light as a quanta of light, for instance, or an electron is a quanta of energy. So that's the original meaning, and then quantum physics is all about studying these subatomic particles and realizing they don't behave according to the rules of physics that has been existed from the past, that they have their own spooky energy where one thing happens and it affects something else at a distance and everything is interconnected, quantumly entangled. So, but in terms of how it relates to healing, is that there is a quantum field that's known to science, which is basically a field that has all potentialities in it. In other words, every possible thing that could happen exists within this field, but it can't be measured. It's formless. And then something, which I believe is consciousness, triggers that quantum field to create these waves to go into particles and then turn into things that we can identify, like a banana or a goat or the sun or a new idea or something like that. And then everything goes back to the quantum field. So the quantum field is this field of oneness that interconnects everything. And see, that may sound very kind of like abstract, but what I experience, what rubber meets the road, where it's very practical, is that a client could come in my office who's traumatized or has chronic pain or has neurological issues or depressed or can't get over anxiety. And they've tried all these other kinds of holistic therapies and medical therapies and shamanism. So many of them have tried. It's amazing how many things people have done. to try to get over these chronic forms of suffering they're having. And then what I've noticed is in the first session, when I work with people, even if they're not metaphysically oriented, they don't even have a belief system around this, they say things like, "Oh, I feel so relaxed," or there's a part of them that just lets go because I believe they're feeling the quantum field. It's like I believe we were created in this field of oneness, and this world is like almost like walking around on broken glass all day because there's a sense of separation that is just our new normal, like this fall from grace that we all live in, and it just seems like it's normal to be stressed out and have anxiety and to just feel like your mind is overactive and you're tired at the end of it. That's just normal. But it's not normal. What is normal is being in the quantum field and feeling that sense of oneness. And so I found out that clients, again, who have no previous belief system and maybe are even skeptical about metaphysical things, they almost every single time they have that feeling of directly feeling the quantum field. And from that place of touching into their own oneness, then they're able to make these significant shifts very quickly about letting go of old programming from their psychological background or energy blocks in their body, some of which have been very, very elusive to change in the past.
Wow. And so in the book, you lead people through some exercises and practices, correct?
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
that allow them to act. So maybe talk about some of those that, as you're describing them in the book, because obviously these will be people reading your book, trying to implement these exercises for themselves, right?
Right. The practices are absolutely essential. In fact, all the 4 books I've written are all full of practices. I just am not the kind of person who likes to just write abstract ideas and leave it on that level. My books always have step 1, 2, 3, 4. That's just the kind of things I put out there. And so this one is even more so. It starts the very first, well, I guess there's an introduction, and the chapter after that that's called Getting Started immediately launches a series of 6 simple practices that people can learn to do in just a few seconds. So I love that. I call it the foundational practices. And once you grasp it, there are forms of focus you can do very quickly that puts you into a state of embodiment. It's amazing how simple it is. And then from that, there's many other practices that get more involved, that involve forms of breathing, like central channel breathing is one of my favorite exercises. There's ones for self-healing, like the inner embrace is one of the practices for self-healing. Activation of the light body, Merkaba, is one of the practices that anybody can learn to do who's really interested in that. And then there's practices about training yourself to see the new earth. And that's a whole nother thing, that I really see that there is a new earth that is more enlightened already here. It's not like we have to create it. It's just that it's like shifting from one channel on the TV to a different one. It's like shifting stations from the old conflictual earth that's full of top-down, power-hungry people and like the lowest common dominator runs each country, to this one where really there already is harmony. And it's hard for people to believe, but it's already here. So there's many of these types of practices that are in the they take people into that 5th dimension in a very simple way.
So Darren, would you mind sharing with us a very simple one right now? And then we'll go on and talk more about your book. But can you lead us?
I would love to, yeah.
Okay. All right.
So let's work with those foundational practices.
Perfect.
So I invite anybody who's listening to this to participate with this and just let it be simple. And so there's 6 steps to it. And explaining it takes time, but once you know it, it can be, again, it's all done together in a few seconds. So the first one is clearing our space so that any kind of energetic interference is removed from your space instantly. So I just put my hand in the air and say, I now command a purity blast. And I visualize a downrushing whoosh, like a tornado of white light, just moving through my field instantaneously and clearing the room that I'm in. And that's very significant because when I'm in a room with clients, and let's say one client finishes their session, there's a certain residue that hangs out in the subtle energies of the room from that previous client. And I think the next client deserves a totally clear and clean, rebooted space. So a purity blast clears the space. So when the next one comes in, it's completely clear of any impressions from the previous patient. And the same thing with running teaching events or workshops. A purity blast clears the space. So that's the first one. Just you simply request it and trust that it's done. I now command a purity blast. See, when I do it, I feel a kind of just move through the room. It's kind of subtle.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the first step. Second one is putting the tip of your tongue on the roof of your mouth, slightly behind your two front upper teeth on the upper palate. That spot is a circuit breaker, basically, that connects all the yin or nutritive feminine energies of the body with all the yang, more active masculine energies of the body, as acupuncturists would look at it, just by putting your tongue in that position. So it instantly balances all your energy and puts you more inside your body so that you're more in a state of embodiment. So if you just put your tongue there, and then while your tongue's in that position, breathe in your lower abdomen. That's two things together. Relax. And just, for whoever's listening, just notice just that step, first of all. Just what's it like to have your tongue in that master hookup position while breathing in your lower abdomen? An interesting fact is when your tongue is in that position, it's almost impossible to feel anxiety. So if you watch yourself, if you're feeling anxiety, you'll have to take your tongue away from that position in order for your mind to rev up with anxiety. It's a little interesting, valuable fact. And the next step would be to let some of your energy, next thing is called call yourself in. It's recognizing that we as human beings tend to disperse our energy out to different people we're thinking about or unresolved situations we're a little uncomfortable with, or something you saw on the news, or the fight you just had with your significant other, or you didn't get your dog to the vet. Our energy is out, literally goes out of our body for these things. So you simply say, I call myself in. And just imagine that from every direction, all this energy is coming right back into your body. And now continue the tongue on the roof of your mouth and breathing deeply with that one. If you're sensitive, you should be able to notice a shift from that. And then the next step is allowing some of that energy you've called into your body to sink downward into the earth so that you're rooting into the earth. And 2 feet underneath you, wherever the earth is underneath you, 2 feet into the earth, there's what's called the Earth Star Chakra. And it's actually a part of our body that's in the earth, that's always following us. And many people are very cut off from that in modern civilization. And that's one reason there is so much stress and anxiety and overactive mind and premature aging and things like this. So just allow some of your energy to sink down into the Earth Star Chakra and connect. Just kind of let down, like, oh. Continue to have the tongue on the roof of the mouth and breathing. Now, as soon as I do that, I just feel better, going down to the earth. And then the final step is called loving presence. Is that from this place of being embodied, of presence, you just kind of tune into your heart and just a feeling of love and benevolence. And sometimes it's helpful to think of somebody, specific person that you love, or your dog, or Jesus, or Mother Mary, or your mother. I mean, whoever it is that would most easily just bring a smile to your face and a feeling of love. Think of that person and just be in loving presence. And then kind of let go of focusing on that person. Just be in love, just pure love, because love is your true nature. So those are the steps. Purity blast, master hookup with the tongue, breathing deeply, call yourself in, let some of the energy sink down into the earth, and then be in loving presence. So just try that let's just be silent for a moment to just savor what that does for you to do those simple practices. You are being your avatar self more by being in these foundational practices.
This is excellent. Thank you so much. So this is not only an endorsement for your book, but also an endorsement for working with you privately one-on-one, which you do in person and also online now.
Yes.
We'll do this at the end again, but how can people be in touch with you?
Best way is through my website, which is drstarwyn.com. That's DRSTARWYNN.com. And there's also a whole page about my new book on that website too. But if you're interested in learning about my personal services or sessions, it's also right there on the home page.
Wonderful. Yeah, because you are very healing. I mean, I know that I had several sessions with you that were quite profound. Not only were they healing, but they were very opening. We were accessing a lot of information.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about, I've been burning to ask you this question. What's your favorite part of the book?
Oh, thanks for asking that. I think my favorite part of the book is the introduction chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Because I put so much work into that, and I feel like somebody could just read that introduction and basically get the gist of the book. Like, it's kind of like a preview of all the things that there'll be coming in the book. And people who have read it have given me feedback that it's really inspired them to want to read the rest of the book because it has so much in that one chapter. I mean, basically, it introduces what an avatar is in a more contemporary sense, and then it talks about what's going on the planet and what's going to take to save the human race and get us through this time, and how avatars and light workers, specifically, what our role is in doing that. And then it talks about some of the historical avatars like Jesus and Buddha and Krishna and Kuan Yin, and then it goes into some of the science behind this. I mean, it's just a lot in there. So I think that's my favorite one, just because it kind of sums up the whole thing.
That's wonderful. And now I know that you have many wonderful anecdotes and stories.
Yeah.
Can you share a couple of those as they relate to what you're teaching in the book for people to do?
Yes, there's basically those anecdotes mainly just came from clients who I've worked with who have had truly miraculous shifts within just a few sessions, and they gave me permission to put their stories in there. Like one is a woman named Shannon, who's actually a very successful coach and nutritionist and gymnast. And she actually made a little video testimonial because she was so grateful for what she experienced. And what she said in there was that she had quite a bit of childhood trauma that she thought it was resolved, but it had been coming up for her and really destabilizing her. She was in her 30s when she came to me for this. And that within, she said, 1 to 2 sessions, it completely vanished. And she had never seen that happen. She said she had done Reiki and she had done so many different kinds of healing work, and she had had various improvements that she had never seen the complete charge that she was feeling on that trauma completely vanish in 1 or 2 sessions. And it was lasting for her. And actually, after those sessions that we had, she went on to become much more of a spiritual teacher herself. She kind of shifted her work from more, the gymnast work and the nutritionist work into much more like leading meditations and things, because it awakened her avatar so much more. So that
Do you
was.
remember specifically which tools you were using with her that engaged that kind of a response?
I remember she's very intuitive, and I remember when we'd have these sessions that a lot of intuitive information would come up in the first like 10 minutes of each session. Like basically just things about many different aspects of her. Like, in other words, I thought about what her true identity was as a soul, because she was acting out a certain amount of her potential, which is, she's one of these kind of brilliant people that whatever she does, she's successful with and seems to draw lots of people to her and everything. So she was doing that on a very physical level. And then we'd get these messages that we could corroborate together that she actually was a soul with this much bigger mission and that had a huge amount of light, and yet there were certain like issues from her past, including past lifetimes, that were still interfering or blocking some of that. So those things, it's almost like each time she come in, another layer of that would come up, and then we would work together with some of the, I have like trauma release methods I use that combine not only quantum healing, but microcurrent, which is an actual devices that put out, that have wands you can apply low frequency energy and light to the body on acupuncture points. I did some of that with her. And also, there's a technique I use called adjusting the assemblage point, which I think you experienced that, Marguerite, and
I did.
that's using a crystal wand to help basically align the bigger energy field that we are with the physical body. And what I found is that people that have chronic anxiety or difficult depression that's hard to heal, or they're very antsy and driven, or they're very kind of disembodied and ungrounded, any one of those four things, when it's hard for them to relieve those issues, that usually their assemblage point is misaligned and nobody knows about this. Hardly anyone even understands what this is. So I'm one of the few people in America that actually even practices this. And there's a special crystal wand I can use, and in 5 minutes, just basically drag the assemblage point back into place. And people usually experience a shift immediately. It's noticeable.
And is that something that's in your book that you lead people through without the crystal wand, perhaps, or?
That particular one is not, can't be led through the book. I
Okay.
haven't found a way to do that.
Okay.
There's a lot of other ones that they can be led through the book. Like a lot of this.
Let's talk about one of those. And then, I mean, you've already given us such an amazing experience, but let's talk about another one. And then let's talk about another example, another story
Hmm.
um, of that's in your book.
Yes, right. Well, it's like some of the self-healing, there's a basic self-healing methods in the book that are put in step-by-step methods. And one of them, I believe it's chapter 9, is something about self-healing through the quantum field. And there's a basic, I've studied so many different healing methods, and I found that there's certain common constituents to all of those. And one of them is that you have to find where in your body the energy charges for something that you think is just in your mind. Like people might think, well, I'm feeling anxious, or I have an issue with my boyfriend, or whatever it is. I can't get ahead financially, but there'll always be a place in the body where you can identify where it feels like there's something out of balance in that place. So I lead people to find that area in their body and then to bring their own spiritual transmission. And that's a major thing that's a part of this book, is how you identify your spiritual transmission, which is basically your own highest source essence that you can learn to actually feel for yourself. It doesn't have to be an abstract idea. And then you bring your own spiritual transmission to that part of your body. And then there's various like you can squeeze the muscles inside your body around that, which is called the inner embrace. Actually giving yourself an internal hug without using your arms, just using your internal muscles. And so basically, this is spiritual alchemy, that
Mhm.
the kind of healing that I lead people through in the book. And it's simple. It's simple that anybody could follow these steps if they're motivated to do it.
That's right.
So that's an example of one of the methods of self-healing in that book.
You
And
know,
as far,
Darren, yeah, I just wanted to say I've worked with various tools in psychic training and
yeah,
so forth and so on, and inner child work and everything. But I'm re-inspired to really read back through your book and practice these things, because I know that for myself and for many people right now, anything that is unhealed is coming up for
yes,
healing in a big, big way. And it's like, how am I going to get through this trauma? How am I going to release this trauma? How am I going to get through this anxiety? What can I do that will really engage myself so that I can move into fifth dimensional consciousness without this constant ping ponging back and forth of having a good day and then having a bad day, and not really knowing what to do. And it just feels to me like your book is a whole step by step primer, that if you did everything in this book, you really would be able to step into that new dimensional living and correct yourself when you step out of it much more easily.
thank you. Yes. I consider that what we are working on is mastery. Now, there is so many people that I would call light workers or luminaries or spiritual teachers or healers. There's so many people I know that we both know, people in our respective areas. What you're talking about, that ping-ponging, is such a big issue. I mean, for one thing, in the spiritual community, there's such an intense sense of polarization in people's beliefs. I mean, that's been shocking since the last presidential election to me. I mean, people that are all getting along harmoniously, some of them became very strong Trump supporters, and some of them are abhorring that, and then they couldn't communicate with each other, and
I know.
like to listen.
Even within the spiritual community, which is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, even more pronounced in the spiritual community. So there's a lot of, and that's external. It's also internal. Like that dichotomy, that split is happening inside of people, and it's driving us crazy. I mean, if you don't know how to be in a state of more mastery with your own energy, it can be a very stressful time, overwhelming time to be alive. So what
Yeah.
mastery means to me is that really it's having your own energy inside your own body and actually knowing how to work with your mind in a way so that you basically, let's say, your higher vibrational energies of love and of spiritual presence and of knowing are actually predominating over the monkey mind's reactivity more of the time. And there's ancient principles that come out of ancient Egypt called the seven hermetic laws that I'm sure you've probably heard about. And in those seven hermetic laws, they actually show you how to have this kind of mastery, but very few people have read about those. But I talk about them a lot in my book as well, these laws and how you can use them to be in greater mastery.
It's truly a gift, this book. And and let's have you talk about another
Yeah,
example.
another example. So there's a woman named Quincy who's a Chinese American woman in her 60s who's runs something like seven corporations. She's on the board of directors of all these different companies, and she has a huge family around the San Francisco Bay Area that she's kind of the matriarch of at this point. And she was referred to me a year and a half ago, I think, because she was having so many different issues. She had had, I don't know if it was a stroke or something like that. And after that, she couldn't walk well, and her mind was not clear. And she had a kind of brain fog. And the main reason she came in was ankle pain, actually, because she was really bothered that she couldn't walk and exercise and she was gaining weight. That was actually what brought her in. But as she came in, she talked about all these other issues, that her brain was not clear, she couldn't walk well, she was having issues with some of her organs, low energy. And so basically, in that first session, I adjusted her assemblage point, balanced her chakras, and then we went into some of the quantum healing work, like helping her to experience the quantum field, and a little bit of work with microcurrents. So it was a combination of different methods. And at the end of that session, her ankle pain was almost completely gone. She was able to walk up and down the hall of my office pain-free for the first time, and her mind felt clear, and her energy felt stronger. And I didn't even touch her ankle the whole session. Didn't do anything to her ankle. It was just balancing these different energies, and the ankle is really just the tip of the iceberg. And then she had a series of sessions, and within a short time, she started walking like 2 miles every morning. She changed her diet. She
Wow.
made different changes, and then she actually started doing Tai Chi and Qigong. In other words, her life changed because she had this dramatic improvement of her symptoms from the quantum healing that allowed her then to do what she needed to do to raise the level of her life and improve her lifestyle. And this is based on the principle called epigenetics, which I talk about a lot in my book. And
Yes, let's have you go into that. Tell us about that.
yeah, epigenetics is this up and coming science that talks about it talks about DNA and the gene expression. Genes are the within DNA, the actual what makes up all our traits at any given moment. And so in the old days, when I went to school, we were taught in biology class that you inherit your traits from your parents, whatever qualities there are, and then whatever diseases they have, they pass on to you, and that there's not that much you can do about it. But epigenetics has shown that that's totally false, that we're constantly recreating our body through the lifestyle we live, through our thoughts, through our feelings, and what our environment is around us. So if you can take charge of those things, like eating a better diet, thinking different thoughts, exercising more vigorously, and being in more spiritual consciousness, you can literally change your DNA gene expression, and you can remodel your body in a very different way than your parents were or your ancestors were. So that's what epigenetics is, and it's an amazing field. So basically, in Quincy's case, in that case, because she had this miraculous shift that allowed her to walk again and do all and have her mind clear and feel so much better, she started putting new epigenetic input into her body by eating differently and by walking 2 miles every day and by doing qigong and thinking differently, and her DNA literally changed because she was putting a different input and her body changed. So that's a great example of how that works.
That is so amazing. That's just incredibly beautiful. So I really highly, highly endorse this book.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, here we're talking about Awaken the Avatar Within by Darren Starwynn, a roadmap for uncovering your superpowers, upgrading your body, and uplifting humanity. Really, I could think of nothing more needed than this book at this time when we are really being faced with all of our unhealed spaces, all of our unhealed places, and the opportunity to move into that new earth dimensionality, which necessitates all of this healing. So last point, and then we'll talk more about you and again, how people can access you and the book. So we've talked a lot about the healing aspect. Let's talk about the aspect of the book that goes into the new earth possibilities.
Yeah.
What is the bright future for us?
Yeah, that's really important to talk about. You see, this is where the fifth dimensional way of looking at it is very different. The third dimensional way would be we have all these issues on Earth and we need to mobilize ourselves, politically, environmentally, spiritually, whatever it is, to change this world, to make changes, to get rid of the corruption and to pass fairer laws. And that level is still important. And I actually participate politically to a certain extent. But I feel like the real solution, I don't think we're going to get where we need to be just from that level. The fifth dimensional is that we are multidimensional beings. That means that each of us is living in many dimensions of existence at the same time. So if you think of a cut diamond in a diamond ring, it has all these facets on it. So I have one image in my book that shows that out of all those facets, there might just be one facet that we call reality. And we say, this is our life. This is the world. And then we're ignorant. We're just oblivious to, let's say, the other 12 or 15 facets on the diamond. And we just think of that. We either don't believe they even exist, or some people say, oh, that's woo-woo. You're thinking of all, because it's different than their consensus reality that they're in. And I always find that word woo-woo very interesting, because when somebody says that's woo-woo, and it's not tongue-in-cheek, basically what they're basically saying is that I am completely focused into third dimensionality, and I am ignorant of the rest of who I am. And I'm going to disparage anybody else who is actually awakening to that, because it makes me insecure. That's my long way of describing woo-woo.
Right.
But in terms of the new earth is already here. In other words, Jesus said, let there be, on earth as it is in heaven, as part of the prayer he said. So that, some of the things Jesus said are very precise scientific statements when you really break them down.
Yeah.
And so on earth as it is in heaven is saying that this higher vibratory level where love and compassion and truth and disclosure is what actually is predominating already is here. It's just you have to have eyes to see it. And I'm not saying this as an idealistic statement or as a hopeful statement. To me, it's just as real as the fact that there's this computer in front of me, or that I can touch my head, or whatever it is. It's real because I can see it some of the times. Sometimes I'm distracted and I don't see it. But I've noticed if I take a walk outside, and I just let go of my habituated mind that's been doing all my tasks and whatever it is, that lately I look at the sky or clouds moving or bees buzzing around a bush or something like that, and I just see it with new eyes. I just see this different light around it, and I just see the new earth. I see it in people at times when they're in that state, when they're in a different brainwave state where they're resonating with it. And so I know it's very hard to grasp that with all the suffering in the world. How could you say there's a new earth here? But it's here, but then it does take practical action of awakening people to it so that they experience it, so that it's less abstract and it becomes practical. And that's where light workers come in. And by the word light worker, I'm using a very precise definition of the word. It means people who are dedicating themselves to bringing this higher dimensional light to other people and to themselves. And so it's epigenetic change again. But you bring more light in, it changes your DNA, it activates your light body, and then you can help activate other people. So I feel like it's more of an action of people embodying that themselves, and then in groups of people doing that, it's greatly amplified.
Yeah.
And that there's a point where the old earth, which is full of all the corruption and all the problems and all the issues and trauma and pollution and illusion, pollution and delusion and all those kind of things, becomes taken over by this new earth because more people are recognizing it. Because we're just beings of consciousness. I mean, really, we think we're physical, but we are basically just beings of pure consciousness. So what we're perceiving is our reality. That's the secret. And so when more people are perceiving the new earth and knowing themselves to be an avatar, it's powerfully changing the calculus for the rest of the human race because we're all interconnected.
Beautiful. Wow, Darren, that's just wonderful. Thank you for being here today and for writing this book. How can people access it? And again, how can people connect with you?
Well, one thing I've made what I would like to talk about is that there's a web page that's part of my drstarwyn.com webpage. If you go to the homepage of, again, it's DRSTARWYNN.com, drstarwyn.com. There'll be a pop-up right on the homepage. It'll talk about my new book. If you click on that, it takes you to a page where I've created a free course that has wonderful resources for anybody who buys the book. So if you go to that page, all you have to do is, let's say you click a button there to go to Amazon to buy the book in either ebook or physical book. And then when you come back and just put your name and email and the transaction number, you immediately get this course in which I've, with my own voice, I've narrated brief segments of all the key chapters in the first section of the book.
Wow.
And then I've also created, I think it's like 9 guided meditations. 6 of them are in audio form, MP3 form, and 3 of them are in video form because I wanted how to demonstrate things you couldn't do in audio. And I put a ton of work into making this course, and it's free. It's just a gift to people for people who are interested in this and who just buy the book.
Wow. So
And
the combination of the book and that course is truly amazing. I mean, you will be set for moving into the new earth with that.
yeah, I feel like the course is important because some people learn better by listening than having to do the practices by reading. So you can just listen and go through the practices. And there's beautiful music in the practices, and all that really helps a lot.
So it's really connected to the book then, that
Yeah,
course.
it's very much a companion to the book.
Excellent. So go to drstarwyn.com and you can find out about the book, find out about the course, find out about how to contact Darren for
Yeah.
questions or for personal sessions, be it online or in person in the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area, etc. Any final words before we part here?
This is the time. For anybody who considers themselves to be a spiritual person or a light worker or whatever term, a goddess, devotee, or whatever statement that they would use, this is the time for us to be our avatar self. And we are the ones that have the power to make this happen. And so I really encourage anyone to don't think that sometime in the future is the time when I'm really going to give my best or really bring out my gifts and develop my superpowers. Because that's one thing, another thing my book talks about is how you develop your superpowers as an avatar. This is definitely the time. So I would just encourage and offer any support I can. And strength is in numbers. So come together with other people who are also in this process, who really care. And our power expands exponentially. It's the power of love, and it's the greatest power there is.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. So we recommend that you go to drstarwyn.com, get your book, Awaken the Avatar Within, get your course that goes along with it, and really allow yourself to start moving and doing the healing that you need for this precise time that we've all incarnated for. I want to thank you, Darren. I want to thank everybody who's watching. And also, you can always, again, access sevensistersmysteryschool.com, where we have many companion kinds of offerings,
Yeah.
as what Darren is talking about. And he and I are going to be talking again. We're going to reverse, and he's going to interview me.
That's right.
So, yeah,
December 3rd.
Yeah, December 3rd, 2021. And that, again, will be put on all the platforms, YouTube, Facebook, and so forth. So you'll be able to access that. So stay tuned to the Seven Sisters Mystery School newsletter and Darren's newsletter as well, which I know you can register for when you go to that page. Correct, Darren?
Yes.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah,
All right.
I look forward to interviewing you and learning much more about that system that you've been teaching about.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks again, Darren. And we'll just say goodbye for now, everybody.
Okay.
Ciao, ciao.
Okay, bye. Thank you so much for taking your time today.
Thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome.